The first time I spotted Karen in my backyard, she was standing next to my flower bed, using my hose to water my plants. She turned to look at me, not a hint of shame on her face, and said, "You're doing it wrong," as if she owned the place. I didn't say anything at first, but deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary neighbor situation. Still, I let it slide because I was too naive to think this would escalate. That was my first mistake. The second time, I walked out to find Karen lounging in my hammock, sunglasses on, feet up, sipping from what I swear was my lemonade. "Your backyard has the best sunlight," she remarked, as if that somehow gave her the right to use it as her own private retreat. I told her to leave, but she just laughed and took another sip. By now, I should have been used to her audacity, but it still caught me off guard. By the third time, I wasn't even shocked anymore. I stepped outside to find her casually hosting a brunch for 2 friends at my patio table. She waved to me like I was the one intruding. "Oh, you're home. Want a mimosa?" she asked, as if I should be grateful for the invitation. That was when I realized Karen wasn't just ignorant or clueless. She was something else entirely. She was a living embodiment of chaos, a suburban nightmare dressed in expensive leggings and a sense of entitlement. I tried to reason with her. I really did. I told her she had no right to be on my property, but she casually replied that the HOA didn't technically own the airspace above my backyard, so she wasn't trespassing. I called the police, but they came, gave her a warning, and left. She laughed it off and walked right back onto my lawn the very next day. Felt like there was no end in sight. Then came the hot tub incident. One crisp Saturday morning, I stepped outside to find Karen soaking in my hot tub, head resting on a towel like she was at a spa. "The temperature is perfect today," she said, her eyes closed in bliss. I couldn't take it anymore. I demanded she get out, but she sighed and replied, "Legally, you can't kick someone out of water. Water belongs to nature." I stared at her, bewildered, wondering if I was caught in the worst dream of my life. This wasn't just an annoying neighbor. It was a battle I couldn't avoid. I had to come up with a plan. I wasn't just dealing with a pesky neighbor anymore. I was dealing with someone who had no respect for boundaries or basic decency. I thought about installing electric fences, but that felt a bit extreme. Security cameras? She wouldn't care. A lawsuit? She'd probably countersue me for emotional distress after I told her she couldn't touch my garden gnome collection. That's when I found the ad. Need to keep unwanted guests out? Meet Titan, the ultimate guard dog. I clicked on the link, half expecting it to be some kind of scam, but the pictures of this dog, this beast, changed everything. Titan wasn't just a dog. He was a 7-foot-tall mix of wolf, mastiff, and something straight out of a myth. The reviews were glowing. "Titan changed my life, better than any security system," one said. "My ex-wife hasn't come back since," said another. I didn't hesitate. I had to have this dog. The breeder didn't even blink when I asked about the price. "Titan doesn't go to just anyone," he said. "He's special." I assured him I needed something special, and the next day, Titan was delivered. He was massive, pure muscle, thick black fur, and eyes that made you question whether you'd made the right decision. But surprisingly, he was calm, friendly even. I spent the day getting to know him, playing fetch, scratching behind his ears. He was perfect. Then came Karen. It was like something shifted the moment she stepped onto my lawn. Titan's fur bristled, his ears flattened, and a low, guttural growl started to rumble from his chest. Karen froze in place, one foot still hanging in the air as Titan locked onto her like she was his prey. "Nice dog," she said, but it wasn't convincing. Titan barked so loud I swear the windows rattled, and before I knew it, Karen had bolted down the street faster than I'd ever seen her move. I thought that was the end of it, but no. Over the next few days, I noticed something strange. Titan didn't just dislike Karen. He despised her. Whenever she walked past my house, his entire body would tense, his eyes would narrow, and he would growl, low and menacing. He didn't react like that to anyone else, just her. Karen, of course, was furious. "You trained that dog to hate me," she yelled, standing on the sidewalk as if this was all some grand injustice. "This is harassment." I tried to reason with her, but she was beyond listening. He has good instincts, I told her. Maybe he just knows your trouble. That only made her angrier. She called the HOA, of course, and they just laughed her off. So, Karen had to get creative. First, she tried bribing Titan with a steak, tossing it over the fence. He caught it in midair, sniffed it, and then buried it without taking a bite. Next, she tried to sweet-talk him, cooing at him like he was a pet, but Titan just stood there, glaring at her like she was the enemy. Her attempts to buy his affection were laughable. Then came the ultimate act of desperation Karen called animal control. Animal control showed up like they had somewhere better to be. The officer walked up, glanced at Titan, who was peacefully sitting beside me, tail wagging, and turned to Karen. "What's the issue here?" he asked. Karen immediately launched into her usual rant about how dangerous Titan was and how he had it out for her specifically. The officer didn't seem particularly concerned. "Has he attacked anyone?" he asked me. I shook my head. "Nope, not a soul." "Has he left your property?" "Nope, not even once." The officer raised an eyebrow and turned to Karen. "Unless you can prove he's been causing harm, there's nothing we can do. Maybe stop trespassing on other people's property," he suggested casually. Karen didn't take that well. She shrieked at him, accusing him of ignoring her distress, but the officer just shrugged. "Lady, if you don't have proof, there's no case." Karen didn't let up, though. She wasn't about to give up her crusade. The next night, just after 2 a.m., my security cameras caught a familiar figure climbing over my fence. It was Karen once again, and this time she had a ladder with her. Titan was already awake, his body tense as he watched her from inside the house. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the door, and Titan moved like a shadow, silent and swift. As soon as Karen's foot hit the ground inside my yard, Titan shifted, rising from the shadows like a creature out of a nightmare. His golden eyes locked onto her, unblinking, like he was waiting for her to make her move. She froze, her eyes wide, her body stiff. For the first time, I saw fear on her face. She tried to whisper, "Nice doggy," but Titan's deep, low growl stopped her in her tracks. I could practically see her weighing her options, run or face the consequences. She chose to run, scrambling back over the fence like a frightened child. I couldn't help but laugh a little. She had finally met her match. The next morning, Karen didn't come to my door, didn't call the police, didn't try anything else. But that didn't mean she was done. Oh no, she just upped the ante. The next few days were filled with her trying every tactic imaginable. She stood at the edge of my property, arms crossed, glaring at Titan like she could will him into submission. Titan, however, just stared back at her with an intensity that made her look like she was standing still in time. This lasted for a good 5 minutes before Karen huffed, turned, and stomped off. She didn't stop there, though. The food bribes kept coming. First, a raw steak, which Titan sniffed, picked up, and promptly dropped into the trash. Then came a rotisserie chicken, followed by bacon, ham, and gourmet dog treats. Every single one was ignored like it was beneath him. Titan wasn't impressed, and Karen was getting more desperate with every failed attempt. One afternoon, she stood by the fence, talking to Titan in a sugary sweet voice, trying to charm him with a tone that made my skin crawl. "Look at you, such a handsome boy," she cooed. "You don't hate me, do you?" Titan didn't respond. He didn't growl, bark, or even blink. He just stared at her with such intensity that she actually laughed nervously. "Come on, big guy, let's be friends," she urged. But that was when it happened. Titan let out the deepest, most unsettling growl I had ever heard. Karen physically recoiled, fear now taking over her expression. She muttered something under her breath and stormed off again, clearly defeated. It should have ended there. Any sane person would have backed off, taken the hint, and left me and Titan alone. But not Karen. No, she wasn't finished. The very next night, I woke up to a rustling sound outside. Then came a metallic clatter, followed by a sharp screech. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what was happening. I checked the security cameras and sure enough, there she was, Karen, back in action. But this time she wasn't alone. A man was with her, someone in his mid-40s, wearing a look of annoyance that was clearly shared by Karen. He was holding a large metal pole, looking like he was ready to take on a bear. Karen was giving him instructions, pointing at the fence like she was the one in charge. "Just cut through it," she hissed. "It's just a dog. We'll deal with him once we're inside." I stood at the door, arms crossed, watching them. Titan was already alert, but he wasn't moving. He just stood there, his massive frame a silent warning. I opened the door, and Karen flinched. The man with her took a step back, his face showing more hesitation than I expected. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, eyeing Titan. "That thing is huge." Karen rolled her eyes and snorted. "It's just a dog. He's all bark and no bite." Titan exhaled a sharp breath, a low huff that seemed to mock Karen's belief that this would be an easy task. I crossed my arms. "Breaking and entering, Karen? Really?" I asked, watching her squirm as her plan fell apart in front of her. The man beside her looked like he was about to back out, his hesitation growing. Titan took a single step forward. That was enough. The man dropped the pole like it was made of hot coals and turned on his heel, muttering, "Nope, I'm out." He walked away, leaving Karen standing there, all alone. Titan didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply stared at her, waiting. Karen's jaw tightened as she glared at Titan. "Your dog is a menace. I have every right to protect myself," she screamed, fists clenched in anger. I smiled, knowing that her bluff had finally been called. "Good luck with that," I said, crossing my arms. "I know who you are now, Karen. I know exactly what you did." Her face went pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I pressed on. "You used to own Titan, didn't you? You abandoned him." Her mouth snapped shut, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Not just the anger she usually wore like armor. I could see it then. She finally understood that she was dealing with something much bigger than herself. Titan just stood there, watching her, silent and unblinking. His presence was enough to freeze her in place. I took a step closer. "You can either leave and never come back, or I can call the cops and let them know you've broken into my yard 3 times now. Your choice." Her face tightened, and for a long moment, I thought she might argue. But then she turned on her heel and stormed off. She knew finally that she had lost. The next day, I watched her leave. A moving truck pulled into her driveway, and by the end of the week, she was gone. Titan had won. After Karen left, things settled down, but Titan became something of a local legend. People from the neighborhood started stopping by just to meet him. The kids would run up to the fence, their eyes wide with awe, and the mailman even started bringing him treats. Titan had become more than just my guard dog. He was a hero, and everyone knew it. One evening, as I sat outside on the porch with him, watching the stars, I scratched behind his ears. "You got your revenge, huh?" I asked him softly, knowing full well that he had settled a score far deeper than I ever imagined. Titan let out a satisfied huff, his tail wagging gently. He was content. More than that, he had become my best friend, my protector. The dog I didn't know I needed but couldn't imagine life without. But something nagged at me. I couldn't help but wonder, why had Titan hated Karen so much? It wasn't just a normal dislike. No, this was personal. I couldn't shake the feeling that Titan's animosity towards her was more than just territorial instinct. There was something deeper, something that went beyond a simple guard dog's duty. I decided to get some answers. I called the breeder, the one who had sold me Titan, hoping he could shed some light on the situation. He answered the phone on the first ring. "How's Titan doing?" he asked, and I could hear the genuine interest in his voice. "He's great," I said, glancing at Titan as he lay on the couch, chewing on a toy. "But I've got a weird question for you." I explained what had been going on, how Titan seemed to have a personal vendetta against Karen, and how it went beyond normal dog behavior. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It was the kind of pause that makes you realize the person you're talking to knows something you don't. Finally, the breeder spoke. "What's her name?" I hesitated. Karen. The breeder went silent for a moment. You've got to be kidding me, he said softly. My heart skipped a beat. He let out a sigh, like he was about to tell me something important. Look, I didn't tell you this before because I didn't think it mattered, but Titan had a previous owner. She abandoned him at a shelter when he was still young. She couldn't handle him, said he was too big, too aggressive, too much work. The shelter couldn't deal with him either. They called me because I specialize in training large breeds. My stomach twisted as the truth sank in. Titan's past had caught up to him. The breeder continued. Dogs don't forget. Not really. My grip on. The breeder's words hung in the air like a weight, and I felt the air in my lungs freeze. You're telling me Karen is the same Karen who abandoned Titan all those years ago? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost feel the gravity of the situation. The breeder sighed, his voice low. Yes, she's the one who dropped him off at the shelter, left him behind like he was nothing. I didn't think it would come up, but Titan never forgot. Dogs have long memories, and it seems he's been carrying that grudge all this time. I looked over at Titan, who was lounging on the couch, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I felt a rush of heat in my chest. Karen had abandoned him, and now she was paying the price for it. Titan wasn't just a dog to me. He was a companion, a friend, a protector, and it seemed like he had been waiting for this moment all along. I let out a slow breath, trying to process everything. I can't believe it, I muttered. She never even came back for him. And now he's doing everything he can to make her life miserable. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Titan's hatred for Karen wasn't just instinct. It was personal. This was more than a dog protecting his territory. It was a dog seeking revenge. A dog who knew exactly who she was and what she had done. The more I pieced the story together, the more I understood why Titan had acted the way he did. It wasn't just random aggression, it was a deep-seated need to make things right. He had been abandoned by the one person who should have cared for him, and now he was taking matters into his own paws. It was poetic in a way. Karen had thought she could just walk into my life and do whatever she wanted, but she had no idea who or what she was dealing with. Titan had been waiting for her, and now he was finally getting his revenge. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I had a feeling this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen had been playing a dangerous game, and Titan wasn't the kind of dog to back down from a fight. In his eyes, this was personal, and I had a feeling it was only a matter of time before Karen realized that, too. The next night, I was jolted awake by a strange sound. A scraping noise, followed by a loud metallic clatter. I checked the security cameras immediately, my heart pounding. Sure enough, there she was, Karen, with a determined expression and a pair of bolt cutters in hand. She was trying to break into my yard again. Titan was already alert. I could see the muscles in his body tensing, his fur bristling as he watched her from inside the house. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door, and Titan moved like a shadow, silent and swift, his massive form barely making a sound. Karen didn't even notice him until it was too late. By the time her foot touched the ground inside my backyard, Titan was already rising from the shadows. He wasn't barking, wasn't growling. He just stood there, his golden eyes locked onto her with a piercing intensity. It was like he had been waiting for this exact moment. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his body a wall of muscle and fury. Karen froze, her eyes wide with terror. She gripped the top of the fence, her body trembling. The ladder wobbled slightly beneath her weight, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real, raw fear. "Nice doggy?" Karen whispered, trying to sound calm. But her voice cracked under the weight of her fear. Titan's deep, rumbling growl stopped her cold. I could see her hesitation, her mind racing as she realized this wasn't going to go the way she had planned. I crossed my arms and called out to her. "What exactly did you drop, Karen?" I asked, my voice steady. She didn't answer, her eyes glued to Titan, who was still staring her down like a predator. She started to back away, slowly, as if she thought she could escape. But Titan wasn't having it. He lunged, not at her, but just close enough to send her scrambling backward in a panic. She tripped over her own feet and landed flat on her back with a loud thud. Her hands flailed around, searching for something, anything to grab hold of. But all she found was the grass beneath her and the bitter realization that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. I should have let it play out. I should have let her suffer just a few seconds longer. But I wasn't a monster. I whistled sharply, and Titan stopped immediately. His ears twitched as he looked up at me for further instructions. But he didn't step away. He just loomed over her, his massive frame casting a shadow. Karen scrambled to her feet, brushing dirt off her floral print pajamas, looking like a wild animal caught in a trap. "This is harassment," she snapped, her breath coming in short gasps. "You broke into my yard." I reminded her, my tone cold. She pointed at Titan, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. "That thing is psychotic. It wants to kill me." Titan, for his part, simply sat down, tilted his head slightly and yawned, completely uninterested in her dramatics. I shook my head. "He hasn't even touched you." She wanted to argue, but she knew deep down that she had lost. She was outmatched. Without another word, she turned and stormed off, mumbling something about how this wasn't over. I knew better. It was over. Titan had made sure of that. The next day, things seemed eerily quiet. I thought Karen might be done. After everything that had happened, I figured she'd finally learned her lesson. But, of course, I was wrong. She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The first sign of her return came when I saw her standing at the edge of my property, arms crossed, staring at Titan like she was daring him to move. She stood there for 5 minutes, locked in a silent battle of wills. Titan, true to form, just stared back at her with unblinking eyes, his massive body still and patient. It was like they were in some strange staring contest, but Titan wasn't playing. He knew exactly who was in charge here. Finally, Karen huffed in frustration and walked off. But I knew this wasn't the end. She was like a dog with a bone, relentless. The next day, she tried to bribe Titan again, tossing a raw steak over the fence. Titan sniffed it, picked it up, and then, without even a second thought, dropped it straight into the trash. She tried again with a rotisserie chicken, and then with bacon gourmet dog treats. Each time, Titan ignored her offerings like they were beneath him. It became a game to him, and he was winning. Next, she switched tactics. She stood by the fence, speaking in a soft, sugary tone. "Come on, sweet boy," she cooed, trying to get his attention. "Look at you, such a handsome dog. You don't hate me, do you?" Titan didn't respond. He just stared at her, still and unblinking. She laughed nervously, trying to coax him into being friendly, but Titan wasn't buying it. When she finally got desperate enough to ask him to be her friend, Titan gave her the deepest, most bone-chilling growl I had ever heard. She physically recoiled, her face turning pale with fear. Karen stormed off, but the next night, she called animal control again. They showed up with their usual clipboard and forced smiles. "We got a report about an aggressive animal," the officer said, eyeing Titan, who was sitting calmly beside me, his tail wagging lazily. The officer looked at me, then at Titan, and I could see the realization sink in. "Let me guess," I said. "Karen called you?" The officer nodded. "Yeah. She says your dog is dangerous and specifically targets her." I shrugged. "Titan hasn't left my property. He hasn't hurt anyone. The most he's done is scare her. Frankly, she's been asking for it." The officer raised an eyebrow, flipping through his notes. "We've had complaints about her before," he said. "You mind if I just—" He crouched slightly and extended a hand toward Titan. Titan sniffed it, then licked his fingers. The officer smiled and nodded. "Yeah, this dog isn't the problem." Karen, who had been standing in the driveway, screamed in outrage. "He's a menace. You have to do something." The officer just shrugged. "Unless you have proof that this dog has attacked anyone, there's nothing we can do. Maybe stop trespassing on other people's property." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stormed inside, furious, but there was nothing more she could do. I thought that would be the end of it, but I should have known better. The very next morning, Titan perked up. His ears twitched, and his body became stiff as a board. I didn't hear anything at first, but then I noticed the scraping sound again. I checked the cameras, and sure enough, there she was, Karen. She was back, and this time she wasn't alone. She had brought someone with her, a man holding a large metal pole. Titan wasn't going to let this one slide. As soon as I opened the door, he moved like lightning, standing in front of me, massive and unyielding. The man hesitated, looking at Titan's imposing form. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Karen didn't even look at him. "Just cut through the fence," she snapped. But before the man could make a move, Titan took one step forward, and the man dropped the pole, his face a mask of terror. He turned and ran without a word, leaving Karen standing there alone with Titan. Titan didn't move. He just stood there, towering over her like some mythical beast. Karen's eyes went wide with fear. "I'll sue you," she spat, her voice shaking. "I'll have your dog put down." I crossed my arms and smiled. "Good luck with that," I said, knowing that she had finally met her match. Karen looked at Titan for a long moment, her face paling as she realized she was truly out of options. I took a step closer. "You can leave now," I said, my voice firm. "Or I can call the cops and tell them about the multiple times you've broken into my property. Your choice." Karen hesitated for a moment, and then, without another word, she turned and stormed off, disappearing into the night. The next day, I saw a moving truck in her driveway. By the end of the week, she was gone. Titan had won.